In this interview, I'm joined by Guo Gu, Chan Buddhist teacher, author, and scholar of Buddhism. Guo Gu shares stories of his early training under the mysterious hermit Gūang Qìn, whose siddhi powers were sought after by locals for healing and divination. Guo Gu also details his decades as the attendee and disciple monk of Chan Master Sheng Yen, including examples of Master Sheng Yen's unusual and sometimes painful teaching methods, and shares how a powerful practice brought about Guo Gu's stream entry in a moment of profound repentance. Guo Gu also compares the powerful spiritual presences of his teachers, reflects on the means of acquiring siddhi and why Chan Buddhism de-emphasizes such abilities, and shares the power of humility as a path to enlightenment. So without further ado, Guo Gu, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being willing to come on the podcast, and also congratulations on the release of your latest book, Silent Illumination, published by Shambhala earlier this year in March 2021.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful book, very beautifully written, and actually I'd like to ask you several questions about it a little bit later. But perhaps we could start with your biography. Your first encounter with meditation was as a 4-year-old boy, visiting a renowned Buddhist monk, Gūang Qìn, notorious for, among other things, abiding in meditative absorption for days or weeks at a time. I'm wondering if you witnessed that, eating only fruit and never sleeping laying down. I'm wondering if you could talk about your time with your first teacher, what it was that he taught you.
Yes, in Taiwan, so like many masters during that time, in the 20th century, he escaped communist takeover in mainland China. He went to Taiwan, and he was quite secluded, lived like a hermit, and built his hut. And basically, people discovered him, built a monastery around him. But he was quite distinct, not like anyone that I've met before or since. In Taiwan, he's known as the fruit monk because he only ate fruit, and he was known for his meditative power. I did not witness any of that. His meditative absorptions. When I met him, it was already in the early 70s. And but stories go around, and there are other monks contemporary to him that witnessed and that were alive. So these stories, I presume, are true. I guess because of his diet, his back was always arched, and then his bones maybe shrunk a little bit. So he was a small, petite person. And aside from his ascetic practice, he was also known to have several of the Buddhists recognized supernatural abilities, clairvoyance, seeing their future, reading minds, understanding the past, and so on. So people typically go to him to ask all kinds of questions, and his monastery was basically in the woods. The roads were never built, and it was a treacherous excursion to visit him. Taiwan being a subtropical place, always rained. Every time we go there, there'll be some rain, or just after the rain, and the mud. There's no paved road, so the car would sometimes slip back on the edge of the mountain winding road. It's really, really dangerous. A lot of people choose not to even drive up there. So, we chose to drive up there, but with my family. I remember every time we go there, we would just slide back, and it was just very dangerous. When we go there, there would be teams of people gathered around him, and he always sat in this bamboo chair, received people, sick, diseased, and he would bless, tap water with the great compassionate dharani. Recite over it. There would be bottles already prepared, and sometimes he would do it in person, and people get healed. We're talking about like cancer, and all kinds of problems, not only sickness, but like family problems. So people flocked to him. My family was nearly one among many. But there was a special connection because my mother was a mathematician, and she taught at a private high school. And one of her students became his disciple, monastic disciple. It was a nun. She became a nun. And she later became his attendant. And because of that connection, we were always able to get very close to him, and consult with him, and just hang out with him on his breaks, and walks at the mountainside. So I would, being a kid, I was very, very much drawn to him. In fact, my childhood memory, childhood memories basically evolve around him, the monastery. I don't remember much of other stuff, just kind of fragment bits and pieces. So we visited there so often, and he was always very kind to me. He taught me how to sit in a very strange way. Usually people for the full lotus put one leg up, and then they put the other leg up. The way he taught me is you put one leg up, and you take the foot from underneath to bring it out and put it here. And eventually he just told me, just put it up here, so without hands. So his legs were like arms. it would just go up perfect. So he was very delighted to see that eventually I could do that too. And partly I was just very drawn to him, very kind. I just wanted to please him. I didn't know what I was doing. Just sitting there. He told me to, eyes, watch the nose, mind, watch the breath. So I would sit next to him as he greet different people and do his thing. Sometimes during breaks, I would kind of walk with him on the monastic compound. And those are my deepest memory. And those memories are not just cerebral thinking back. There's this pervasive sense of peace in his presence. Very, very gentle. Retroactively reflecting back, different teachers have different presence. It was just this selfless, spacious, pervasive sense of presence, this peace. No ripples. You smile and teach me this, teach me that. So then we went there almost every week until I was 10. We migrated to the United States. And the next time I went back, he was already dead, passed away. The first thing I wanted to do, I went back 86 or 87. I went back, I knew that he had passed away. So I wanted to see his temple. By that time was all embellished. Roads were actually paved, actually safe to drive up there. The parking lot, white, painted white, all the buildings, monastery. But they kept his bamboo chair in the hall where he used to greet people, but they turned it into a memorial hall. And when I saw that going in there, I just collapsed. Just collapsed to the ground, and just streams of tears, and a flush of memory, but also the feeling of his presence. And at that time, when I went back to the States, I began to explore Buddhism seriously. Now, I met my root teacher, Master Sheng Yen, at age 11. So I really knew how to sit, I didn't know what I was doing, but the posture, the form, and that peace that I was familiar with. With that, growing up in the United States, met my teacher, and he had another kind of presence, very lively, very sharp, kind of penetrating. But he was very adaptive. That's what I mean by alive. So when he spoke to adults, when he spoke to me, he just came alive, teaching me. He was trying to teach me Kung Fu. Right? Yeah, I know he didn't know Kung Fu. He told me, you walk up the wall, across the hall, come down the other side. I was like, yeah, I want to learn that. And then so he said, well, you have to sit first. And I was like, I know how to sit already. Said, oh yeah, you know how to sit? Let me see. So I showed him without hands. And so he was, me and him were kind of immediately kind of very, very close. I knew this was my teacher. I was able to connect with him. So he saw me grow up. I wasn't really serious. With my mom visited his temple. But when I came back after Master Gūang Qīn's passing, came back to the States, I started to explore more deeply. Volunteered in his place and cleaning the monastery, just to be close to him a little more. Volunteered the Chan magazine, providing pictures and layout. Back then, the layout was not computerized. We actually cut out pieces of paper, the text, and the image, prepare everything for the printer. So then he saw me kind of growing up from 11 through my crazy days, but I still kept that connection with him. And then college, I started doing intensive retreats, and it would be 4 times a year. And I lived at a monastery in Chinatown, at the edge of Chinatown and Little Italy. And went to Queens to his temple. So during the weekday, I lived above the monastery. The exchange was I would clean the monastery, get groceries for me to stay there. Because the connection my mom had with the abbot. He was an ascetic too. Very early on, I had this connection with asceticism. And later on, I lived with this monk who's also known as an ascetic, Master Sheng Yen. He copied the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is 60 fascicles, 60 chapters. Each character this big. He copied it in his own blood from his fingers and the sublingual part of his tongue in isolated solitary retreat in China. And so he would teach me different stuff. And he had another kind of presence, very, very powerful presence. So during college, I did this and intensively practiced, and I decided to become Master Sheng Yen's disciple, monastic disciple. But I would say, going back to the first teacher, he's the one who kind of planted the seed. He used to call me, not by my name, he used to call me Dao Hui. Dao Hui. It's the name that he gave me. In translation, Dao, the Dao, the way. Hui means prajna, wisdom. He used to always call me that. I took refuge with him. But usually people take refuge, they get a name, they don't reuse it. The teacher don't even remember usually. So, Dao Hui's here. It's like he's priming me to kind of brainwashing me a little bit to take this path. I'm eternally grateful to him. And that set me on the course.
Very fascinating. Something I've noticed about the way you talk about your teachers, in particular Gūang Qìn and Master Sheng Yen, is very much often with this referring to the quality of their presence, this sort of felt sense, impact. I've heard you express it in those terms. And also I've heard you express, which is interesting, that one of the main reasons you hung out with them, and I think, as you've said in your account, there was an awful lot of hanging out going on, actually, was because you liked them.
Yeah.
You liked them as people. There's something about them that you found attractive to be around. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect, likability? Yes, perhaps could you say a little more about that, please?
Yeah, these people did not have an air around them like a master, very down to earth, very nonchalant, very accessible. So in their presence, it's just drawn. People are just drawn to them, and they had different presences. Gūang Qìn is very unassuming, very unassuming. He must be 5 foot, maybe 4 foot something, 5 foot tall. Very small, skinny, hunchback. A lot of people say that different teachers have different presence, energy field around them. The important thing is that we should know is it's not like emanating field, nor is it conscious. It's like a jade embedded in rocks. It's like gold embedded in coal or rocks or something. The jade itself, there's no awareness. Oh, hey, I'm jade. Jade is pretty precious, or I'm gold. Totally unassuming. No self-consciousness. It's just from their practice. and you sense this selflessness. It's very palpable from other people's perspective. They themselves. So because of that quality, is able to just very easily connect. There's no fixed sense of identity of some sort. So to the kid, like Master Sheng Yen, to the kid, child, it's just a kid. To the adult or rich patrons, they respond a certain way. Also, that third monk, during my college years, I stayed at the monastery. Same thing. There was this one person, very likable, accessible, but in the way they respond to different circumstances, instantaneous change. For example, so what the circumstances call for, they're able to respond immediately. So one time, this guy, mentally unstable person, came in and grabbed the fruit from the altar to start playing baseball, right? Shooting at the Buddha statue and so on. And Master Shou Ye, grabbed his cane. He was different. He was 6'1", that's very rare for that generation of monks. Very big guy. Storming down the Buddha hall with his cane. And this Western dude, it was Romanian. And later on, he came to the temple regularly, just to be around, just to hang out there. But his first appearance, he was just talking to himself and just grabbing stuff, and Master Sheng Yen came storming down the Buddha hall with his cane, speaking Chinese. That's pretty scary, right? So he's speaking Chinese, and then he kind of didn't know he was bigger than the Romanian guy. And he just ran out, right? And all of us have never seen the master like that, never. So we were still in shock, whereas him, as soon as he left, came down, he turned and laughed. Poor fellow. And then just went on, But when he was in that state, it was like a wrathful deity, like those Tibetan Buddhist wrathful deity, demon-like. But instantaneously, whereas our cortisol, stress hormones, are still flushed down through the body, whereas him, just poof, dissipated. Master Sheng Yen, Qūang Qìn, I never saw him like that. He was always peace, like a lucid lake. Master Sheng Yen, I saw him too. Later on, I became his attendant, so I was very close to him. The way he responds, it's like there's no gap. And so that was likable, but with Master Sheng Yen, my root teacher, which I studied with for 30 years, something like that. Because I was so close to him, when I was actually training with him, I must say, it's not so likable. Not so likable. He put me through hell. He found my weakness, and he would just really kind of drill in there to expose my sense of me, I, my sense of self. It's right up in your face. This is where your practice is. Publicly. So, that was precious. And the Master Shou Ye used to call me 小孩子, hey kid. He didn't even bother calling me name. He used to call me the kid. And Master Sheng Yen found that out. And he knew that get to me, get under my skin. Especially, as his attendant monk, it's a very prestigious position. Everyone had to go through me, right? And so when he publicly say, "Hey kid," in front of everyone, that kind of self that I saw, he was teaching me, of course, able to kind of work with that. So not so necessarily like in the beginning, yes. In the beginning, once he lured me in, every instant, he would teach me. I would travel, I would wake up before him, go to sleep after him. I'm with him all the time. So even doing interview, private interview with people. So I would learn and absorb everything. So he knew me inside out. So it was that training that was really, really precious and the most important years of my life.
I'd like to ask you a bit about your time as an attendant to Master Sheng Yen. But first, I have a question about, two questions actually about Gūang Qìn. First of all, you mentioned his siddhi powers or supernatural powers, clairvoyance and so on, healing, making these healing waters, etc.
Yeah.
How do you think he came to be able to do that? Was it a passive consequence of his awakenings or his enlightenment? Or do you think that he engaged in specific practices to acquire those abilities in order to put them in service of people he'd meet and so on, in the same way a doctor learns medicine, etc. How do you frame that, and how common is that in advanced practitioners of your tradition?
So these powers are not necessarily results of awakening. They're more results of samadhi, meditative absorption, that's able to open up, and also tied to not only meditative absorption, but asceticism, which kind of goes hand in hand with especially the people that practice in the mountains, in the cave, for extended duration, years. So I attribute those cities to that. He was not known as a Chan Master Gūang Qìn, in the sense of the Chan school lineage. He was known as Chan Master in the sense of Chan as dhyana, meditation. So the Chinese translation of dhyana is Chan Na. The same character that used Chan, they dropped the Na. But so meditative masters, they also called Chan masters. So he was not, he didn't receive any transmission of any kind. So I'm sure he had powerful insights and so on, but he was really an ascetic practitioner. Same thing with Master Shou Ye, the ascetic who wrote 56,000 characters in his blood. He did that over a span of 5 years in solitary retreat in the mountain in northern China. And Master Sheng Yen, my root teacher, told me that Shou Ye has clairvoyance, and it comes from his ascetic practice. Why would he tell me that? It was a time when I just graduated college, and I was wavering. I had a girlfriend for 4 years. To leave her, become a monk, or not, I was wavering. I didn't say anything to Shou Ye. Nothing. And he was sitting in his chair, seeing me coming in and out of the monastery. He says, "Hey kid, what are you waiting for?" I'm like, "What?" He says, "What? What good is a girlfriend? What's it good for?" The way he framed it was suddenly like, I had no idea what. Of course, I don't want to debunk people's relationship. I don't. It's not meant to be like that. But in that moment, I couldn't understand what was the purpose of a girlfriend. And he says, "Go and become a monk with Sheng Yen." He did not know what I was thinking. He knew I practiced there, volunteered there. I didn't tell him anything. And I told that to Master Sheng Yen. And Sheng Yen said, "Yeah, that's because he's got supernatural power. He can read your mind." I was like, "Read my mind?" Yeah, it's from his retreat, solitary practice. And apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently monks in his generation, Master Sheng Yen and so on, everyone knew that. Everyone knew that. So the way I understand it is not necessarily tied to awakening, insight, but through meditative powers, meditative absorption. And how would this come to be? Now, in the Chinese tradition, Buddhist tradition, of course, Tantric Buddhism exists in China, primarily in the Tang Dynasty. We're talking about 7th, 8th, 9th century. But it quickly dissipated. It didn't really take root. And because Chan Buddhism as a school really de-emphasizes this, even though this is a natural outcome of samadhi power, really de-emphasize that. So there is, to my knowledge, I don't know of any formal methods to cultivate these powers. Sure, one can go to the meditation manuals of early Buddhism and treatises of Tiantai Buddhism, but no one really consulted that. No one really taught that. So I think these powers just come naturally as a byproduct of meditative practice. Now, practitioners, seasoned practitioners, to one extent or another, will have something like this. They may not be able to control it. In other words, it's not always present. But seasoned practitioners will have something. We were taught that when these things arise, don't pay attention to it. Don't flaunt it, definitely. And that you can see in the Chan discourse records, different pre-modern Chan master really dismisses this. For example, Master Dongshan, co-founder of the Caodong or Soto school in China, living as a hermit, decided to visit this other master. And when he arrived, they're all prepared to greet him. He was astonished. He said, "What? Did you know I was coming?" He said, "Yeah, a Dakini, celestial divine being informed us. I had a dream. You were going to come." And Master Dongshan, this is the Chan master, says, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that even a Dakini can read my mind. So that kind of flavor is like, you're supposed to have no mind. So when there's thoughts, intention, not to say we don't have thoughts, but kind of intentional presence of self, then someone can read you. If you can have thoughts, you can respond, but if you're in a selfless state, no one can read you. Non-abiding. But so he was like, he thought back, said, yeah, I had a thought when I was in the hut. So these kind of stories like this give you a flavor like, okay, we shouldn't cultivate any of that. And other stories like Chan Master's, this student come, receiving the students. So you've been living in the mountain for so long. How do you survive? And celestial beings bring me food. Chan Master said, you should be ashamed of yourself. So these stories have provided this kind of undercurrent consensus that you don't talk about that. You should be ashamed if you demonstrate it. But nevertheless, these meditative practitioners, not Chan, these meditative practitioners, they're not necessarily in the Chan tradition, so they don't really have that, so that kind of censorship to that. So it's not that they flaunt it, they're using it to help people, but they don't hide it. It's attributed to their meditation power. I don't think they cultivate it. I don't think methods were around instructions like a doctor, go through med school. I think these are just byproducts.
Fascinating. You differentiated there, it seems, between awakening and samadhi, or meditative absorption or meditative power, and also ascetic disciplines. And in fact, the writing of the sutras in blood, Shoyu's ordeal was the subject, or that theme was the subject of your PhD at Princeton, I believe. Is that correct?
One chapter of the dissertation. Yeah.
I'd love to talk with you about that perhaps another time. Your work in that PhD, really, it's absolutely fascinating topic. However, having differentiated awakening and samadhi like that, what were these meditation masters, such as Gūang Qìn, doing? What was their view, if you like? You write in Silent Illumination, right attitude is most important. It shapes our experience of the method, and that's within a wider discussion about Buddha nature and Yogacara philosophy, which is somewhat the perspective that Silent Illumination is coming from. What would you say was the perspective or the view of practitioners like Gūang Qìn, for instance? What was he doing? Why was he doing that?
Gūang Qìn himself left household life very young, and he was illiterate. So he did not have access to the wealth of Buddhist literature to study, to avail himself to understand. And those were turbulent times. Even prior to the communist takeover, there's different warlords battling out after the fall of the last dynasty, Qing dynasty in 1911, 12. It's just chaos. So illiterate, poor, southern, small family, people very naturally become monks, and some people just live at the monastery as a lay person, to help out and everything. And he eventually became a monk, and he basically just practiced on his own. So he didn't have that doctrinal context, and he practiced. His main method was two. Anapanasati, meditation on the breath, and reciting the Buddha's name. Now, these two methods are the most generic, easily accessible method available at that time, and people know about them. And especially the recitation of the Buddha's name. Now, I would say since the 18, 19, 20th century, this would be the predominant methods. Of course, Chan continued and also influenced Chan Buddhism to tweak this method. Who's reciting the Buddha's name? Turn it into a huato, koan. But so pervasive, this method. So that's the method that he taught. That's why I don't think he really cultivated the siddhis. I think these just came. And he would enter meditative trance. He would find different caves, different berries to eat, different fruits. He didn't bother to grow any vegetables on his own, like many hermits in the Chinese Buddhist tradition. They had a small plot of land and they would plant. They would live in the mountains. He didn't bother to do that, so he just lived, understanding the berries, the fruits, and observing what animals eat, and just practice like that. And he was known to also tame tigers. He practiced for some time at a tiger's cave. It was empty when he went in. He didn't know, he thought it was a perfect cave. And then he woke up, the tigress with the cubs are all back. They didn't really bother him. Finish my meditation, tomorrow I'll leave. He would just talk to the tiger, supposedly. The tiger didn't bother him. He continued his sitting. It was daylight, and bid for farewell and left. These are kind of stories that kind of surround him. That was his context. Woods, forest, eating berries like a wild man, and illiterate, and because of his karmic affinity with the Dharma and meditation, he wasn't an ordinary man. If an ordinary man went to the woods and did all this, maybe nothing would happen. Would fear the night, or there's no light around. But because of his karmic affinities, different aspects of his mind opened up. And that's the opening up a different aspect from samadhi. That's kind of common.
Remarkable. You are, as you mentioned, the personal attendant of Master Sheng Yen for many years, and really with him, certainly his every waking moments, practically, and traveling internationally and accompanying him. And you tell many fascinating stories of that time, including, you mentioned actually already, that he was quite strict with you, quite at quite high standards, and did not hesitate to draw out faults or flaws and then expose them or highlight them, and often in public ways. In one particular, perhaps the core dynamic that he was drawing out in your accounts is what you call self-involvement. And in another of your books, Passing Through the Gateless Barrier, is your translation of the Gateless Barrier, Mumokan as it's called in Japanese, with your commentary, there's this very fascinating section. It's a fabulous book, actually, Passing Through the Gateless Barrier. I recommend everyone check that out, along with Silent Illumination. But to quote you here, it's the koan you're commenting on is, if on the road you meet a person who has fulfilled the way, greet this person with neither words nor silence. Tell me, how will you respond? That's the koan. And then your commentary, and here's a section of your commentary. Haven't you experienced this? When you're doing things for or in front of a person you think is important, you often mess up or become clumsy. I was like that in front of my teacher. Now that I have my own students, I see this too, with people who can do certain tasks well, but who, for some reason, fumble all over the place when I'm around. They get uneasy, either because they want to do well in front of their teacher or because they don't want to be perceived as being less than first rate. Why? It's not because people don't know what they're doing, nor because they think the teacher is important. It's because their tension comes from discriminating between who is important, who is not, who is the teacher, who is a student. Why do people discriminate then? It is because there is attachment to self. So, many teachers talk about their peak meditation experiences. But I think some of the more fascinating stories you share of your ahas are often seen in this kind of context, in interaction with your teacher or in bumping up against general life circumstances. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this self-involvement and the ways in which, perhaps through your relationship to your teacher or general circumstances, you were confronted with your self-involvement and how it was you worked with that.
That's very important because that's the heart of practice, self-referencing, or just simply selfing. The whole path of the Buddha Dharma is designed to work with this. Different traditions come at it from different angles. Chan, daily life. Life is part of practice. It's not confined to sitting posture. And it is through the dynamic interaction, the spontaneous circumstances, and in our responses that the self manifests. When everything is at peace, not threatened, you think everything's fine. It's only when circumstances changing, and that's the beauty of working with a teacher. Sure, intensive retreat are very important. They establish a good foundation for practice, but it's really in the interaction. So there are so many circumstances that, because being so close to my teacher, he knew me inside out, how I would respond to things, and my self-involvement, especially during the novice years, the first few years with him. It manifests as absent-mindedness. I would, when we go on trips, I would remember my things, but I wouldn't remember his things. Meanwhile, my job was to take care of him, So, and being the youngest in the monastery, everyone loved me. They kind of babied me, And I really enjoyed that. And he knew that. But that's another kind of fox's tail that he was able to catch. Right? So every once in a while, he just poke me, reveal the fox's tail to me. Like this one time, in the Buddha hall, chanting. And I love chanting. And because my chanting, I learned it from Master Sheng Yen, this other style, very melodic, and it's tradition from mainland China. So it's different from Taiwan. So I would chant the sutras in that way, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so good, Guo Gu is so good," chanting. And then at the end of the one morning, right, the master is very quiet. The whole hall chanting is finished. The master wait for him to leave. Master Sheng Yen walk by me with the first one, second row. Says, "Hallelujah." And the hall is open, so it reverberates. So everyone's hear this. Right? He wasn't speaking loud, it's just, it echoes. And he says, "Guru, your chanting is pretty good." And I just fell right into that trap. That's the genius of Chan masters. They draw you in and then they go for the kill. Right? So I was like, thank you, Shifu. Very proud. It's especially that he didn't stop there. He drilled it even more. He says, especially the 4 great vows, save all beings. So beautiful. And I was joining my palm. Everyone heard this. They're like, oh, yeah. And then he starts laughing. He says, 4 great vows, save all beings. You can't even remember things for one sentient being, your teacher. And then here you are chanting, save all beings. Just kind of dropped the bomb and just left. And I stood there. Tears just come out. I was frozen. And that hit home. And everyone just exited, a single file. I was just left. At that time, I didn't know where I was. It was just sense of contrition, humility came over. And when I came to, I rushed to my teacher's room. I got down on my knees. Shifu, this is the way I addressed him. I will never forget anything. I will always serve you. I will take care of you from now on. That crescendo changed something in me. And then he says, he looked at me sitting, I'm kneeling. Yes, we'll see. And he says, you have to learn to take care of one person. Get out of your shell. Learn to take care of one person. Then you can learn to take care of Sangha. Then you can see what the society needs. You need to know what needs to be done, what can be done. That humility opened me up, and his words came in. Prior to that, we're just young, early 20s, we're just involved in our own thinking, our own ideas of what practice should be, how I should practice. Taking care of it, that's my job. Right? That's my job as a attendant. Whereas practice, that's meditation. Every chance I get, I would just go to the Chan Hall. Sometimes I would sit like 4 or 5 hours a day while everyone else is working. If I'm not attending, I'll just go right. Sometimes like 8 hours. Deluded understanding what practice is. But humility was the key that saved me. And it anchored my practice. And later on, my insights and opening was also humility. So to me, it's not letting go, it's more like offer. The same thing, 2 sides of the same coin. Really. Offer. A sense of humbleness. So, these pointings, he was so good at it. Spontaneous, in the moment, exactly what I need to hear, and he would utilize the circumstances. Just draw me out, go for the kill. And when he killed too much, sometimes he would do that. When he kind of pushed too much, he will always kind of console me with something nice. This is his skill. like one time, he got me so wound up because it was just public humiliation. He want to see what kind of self-attachment, what kind of self is there. He told me to get a camera for PR purposes. We're gonna take pictures of him in lecture and so different. He told me to do that. I go get a camera, I take pictures, and when he's on stage, got on stage, he used me to break the ice. He's like, look at that kid taking a camera as if he knows what he's doing. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed. We're talking about hundreds of people, and I'm just like, take down my camera, went up to my room. It's like, forget you. I don't want to be here. I don't want to take camera. I don't want to take pictures of you. I went up to my room and I started punching my pillow. It's just like, why did you always do that? And then next day, it's like a father, push you too hard a little bit, and then next day give you a little candy, a little chocolate candy. Says, Guo Gu, someone donated this robes for me. This the fabric. Come to my room after breakfast. Robes, very nice fabric, Guo Gu. It's very good. I think you need new robes. Maybe you could make new robe for you. So I was like, oh, he still cares. So it's just this back and forth. Partly was my age, growing up, like a young person, But he wanted to show me in real time, in real life situations, what is the self. And that was precious because usually when people read books, what the self-attachment, blah, 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 la-di-da-da, pointless. No relevance to how it actually works, the mechanisms. It's the sense of having, lacking, gaining, losing, recognition, rejection, in those live situations. So I came to know in a very live way what self-attachment is. It stopped when I was 26. When I was 26. Yeah. But then I knew what self was. What is it like without self? What is it like with self? So he was able to plant that seed, how to work with it. And how I work with it was humility. And I had a practice tied to it, that is repentance practice. I love meditation. I meditated all the time, but it wasn't really meditation. It was repentance, prostration practice. Full body bows, prostrations. So I did that hundreds of times a day. And repenting for my wrongdoings, self-referencing, and preemptively for what I might be doing. So past, present, future, always vigilant. And so that's how I work with it. This is something that I still do today.
Fascinating. And you've recounted from that incident with the chanting and the critique, if you like, of your absent-mindedness in your job as an attendant. Out of that came a different way of viewing that job and taking it actually as a practice, really. And I suppose both as the method and as the metric for the practice, and even developing, you've told this story of developing this 5-syllable mantra that you had to help yourself remember all the various different things. that you had to keep track of, like, his clothing and is there a draft in the room and etc., etc. Very interesting indeed that you responded in that way. I'm curious, you mentioned humility is key here. Humility is key. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that. You also mentioned that your insights, and presumably by that you mean your spiritual insights, such as Kensho, this sort of thing, realization, sort of insights, also came from humility. I'm wondering if you're able or willing to talk about that aspect also, your own insight, awakening in that sense, seeing through the self, as I think you've put it elsewhere. I'm wondering if you could perhaps talk a little bit about that. So both humility and how it was that your insights have sprung from that.
Humility is not a static notion. There are different circumstances and different shades of understanding, I guess, different shades of practices. But there's a core to it. And it's just the opposite of selfing. The self-referential way of seeing things, understanding things. This humility is putting down what we think things ought to be and really attune to what needs to be done, what can be done, what is needed. So very much in tune. So my teacher was my method. In tune. First I began with his physical needs. Then slowly his heart, his intention, what is his vision, the significance of that. So it began to kind of be integrated into me. So his heart, my heart, before he would say things, like I was so attuned to him, I would understand. He would look at me, like if something happened, he would look at me. I would know what needs to be done, So that required me to just put everything. And I was his translator. All of these things kind of gelled, because as a translator, you definitely cannot have wandering thoughts. If you have any wandering thoughts, you definitely forget different passages. Right? So sometimes he would forget that he's talking for like 5-10 minutes. I was sitting there, I had to tug his robes. He'd translate, So I was watching in tune with exactly what he says, how he says things, why he says things, his intention behind it, where is it coming from, and that was part of the practice. And my method at that time, I was one of his earliest students to practice silent illumination. My meditation method was also openness. It's not the type of concentration that's kind of one-pointed. It's a kind of concentration that's just absence of wandering thought. So presence, clear. Right? So I would be in that state while I translate for him. And in daily life, I would just in tune with everything. So he became my method, he became my life. And how is that tied to humility? Humility does not necessarily mean always humble. No, you go first. Or I'm nothing. Sometimes a humble person can have a very strong sense of self. It's just their personality. So humility is directly connected to absence of selfing, self-referential tendencies. Right? So yes, it could manifest as contrition, in a sense of remorse or humbleness, but in daily life, it simply manifests as just being in the moment, in connection. For me, putting down this, in connection with my teacher. Right? Now, what's needed to take care of one person, the Sangha, or anyone that I met. Right? So that also led to my first awakening, Kensho. But before I say that, I want to provide a caveat for this. Many people seek experiences. That's the only reason why they practice. And people talk about it. But to talk about it, it's a little bit silly. A little bit silly. Because you're talking about it as a thing, right? As an experience, something that happened. Meanwhile, at least the Buddha Dharma awakening, which is none other than Chan, Zen, so okay, it's the recognition that it's not, the whole thing is not about you. You know what I'm saying? So the whole thing is recognize that all beings are already free. So it's not like, oh, I'm free, but then they're not free. No. Anyone who has that experience probably don't know what they're talking about, or not Buddha Dharma experience. So to reify that into like a thing and then talk about that, it's a little bit silly. A little bit silly. So let me say it so it's useful for people, and that is to come at it from humility. Humility, that's a practice. That's useful. So the takeaway, hopefully, is not the Kensho, but the humility part, okay? So I've always traveled with my teacher. But there are things that, even though I was tuned to him, he was my life, he was my practice, I still had kind of self-grasping, right? Habit tendency. That's what self is. It's not a thing. Originally, there's no thing. So it's just habit tendencies and manifesting body, speech, and thoughts and so on. So one summer, he said to me, I'm not going to bring you back to Taiwan. And I said, why? Shifu, why? He looked at me. I looked at him. He said, it's like a knife goes into this. Have you seen how the nuns been looking at you? I knew exactly what he was talking about. I was the youngest, everyone pampered me. I enjoyed that, but there were several nuns who the boundaries are not that clear. Right? And I liked that. I was in my 20s, So he said that, and I said, okay. It was the first time I left my teacher. All this time I've been relying on him. And he left me. Of course, I had a lot of things to do. Stayed in New York, practice. But what he said, those last words, repent. Repent. So I worked myself up into this natural sense of wonderment. It wasn't even really wonderment. It was just I couldn't get out. Wonderment to be like, what is it? What remains? With regard to koans, Gōng, but the flavor was the same. How did I get myself into it? Contributor. I'm contributing to the problem of the Sangha and my own vexations. And I did not see it, did not choose to see it. As a monk, how could I do this? So, it wasn't anything serious, but one nun and I exchanged letters when we were. These letters are innocuous, but something is there. You'll write 3 months later, you'll see me. I'm with my teacher. 3 months in New York, 3 months in Taiwan. But between, she will write me. I kind of knew what's going on, but I wrote back. So this guilt, it's like a snowball, it just engulfed me. Somehow, I start reading the Buddhist sutras, and I came across some stories that really got me feeling great remorse. And I started doing something that I knew I should do. Repentance. And I prostrated myself 500 in the morning, 500 in the evening, and during the day, I just exhausted myself. And I remember, so months would go by, I remember a teaching that my teacher gave me that saved me. He asked me one time, what is the mind for the way? Dōshin. The Japanese would say it, Dōshin. Chinese would say Dao Xin. Dao, the way. Xin, kokoro, heart. Mind for the way. What is that? I start blabbering some text from the sutras. There's no. Body like a rag, mind like a mirror. That's Dao Xin. So I exhausted my life. Every work that other people don't want to do. Clean the toilet, do this in the monastery, go out, teach at a Cooper Union, NYU, different university, Buddhist clubs. I used to hate that. That detracted from my own practice, right? Very selfish. I just said, I don't care about myself anymore. Offer, repent. And because I didn't care about myself, I put myself down. That humility, that sense of wonderment, that overwhelmed me, or you could say everything just collapsed into it. Day in and day out, I would be in that. Started to diminish. I started to have this peace. And within that, there was peace. This is a very unique state. It's not this kind of angst, overwhelming. What is it? If there's a pervasive peace within that, yet there's something stuck. All I knew was something felt stuck. There's this peace. Every time I would, prior to that, for years I would practice sitting up. But during that time, I was so exhausted. Manual labor, doing all kinds of things that require thinking, publications, editing, so on. going out to do these meditation clubs at different universities. I would just collapse at the end of the day, just collapse. Next day was, oh my God, same thing. But there's this peace. And then one time, my room was next to the meditation hall. So I saw the meditation hall on the way to room. I haven't sat in months. Other people, I was ashamed. I had no right to sit. I just prostrated when everyone was sitting. So I felt, I'll just sit for a little bit. Adjusted my posture. Relaxed. As soon as I grounded myself, everything fell away. Body, mind, world fell away. Clarity. Clarity without a reference point. And this clarity, and for the first time I knew, this clarity is not what people think clarity. People think mind is so clear. Nothing to do with that. Actually, nothing to do with that. The difference, what people think about clarity is more like, you clean the glass, spick and span, clear. You see through it, transparent. This clarity was, there's no reference, already clear. It's like no window at all. It's always been like this. No reference point, yet everything present. I don't know how long it lasted. I wrote a letter to my teacher. We had fax machines back then. Fax it to him. He faxed it back. Says, very good. Talk to you when I get back. He gave me rough translation into English. 不做圣洁. Nothing holy. Don't make a big deal. And beautiful. But nothing moved. So those words, it is no big deal. And it lasted for the rest of the time before he came back and afterwards. So a couple of months. And first night he came back, I picked him out of the airport. Next day morning, chanting. I was doing the wooden fish. No. During that whole time, from the letter to when he came back was like maybe a month and a half. I was in that state. It's like no reference point, yet everything is done. So the wooden fish, for example, was that the wooden fish hit itself and the sound reverberates. When I go to the bathroom to pee, it's like a dialogue between the pee and the toilet. It's just beautiful. In the world, people arguing, this beautiful, pervasive peace and freedom. And he called me right after the morning service. Says, Guo Gu, let's go talk. We sat down. I just said to him, it's all good, clear. He was so happy. I never saw him that happy. It was like a mother giving birth to a child, like he's claiming it. Right? He was very happy. He started telling me how to refine it. Samadhi, prajna, simultaneous, and so on. And he says, seven lives left. So I'm like, 7 lives? That's Shatapana, right? That's dream mentor. He says, yeah. He says, John, Awakenings can't really match it one-to-one, but basically, if it's substantial, southern line. If you're lazy, he says, if you're lazy, if you're diligent, sooner. But of course, you travel the Bodhisattva path. I knew what he meant, because, which means you can come and go at will. At least this is the Buddhist paradigm. This is how they frame it. Growing up in the West, I don't really come at will. I don't really know what that is. I didn't really care at that time. He told me that. And he gave me an instruction. Your entry point was repentance, humility. That's why I gave you the name, Guo Gu. I don't know if you know, my name, Guo Gu, the Gu means a valley, empty like a valley. Because my lay name was always at the peak, Yongfeng. So he's put me right down to the bottom, humility. So that is your path. So I took that to heart. So he says, continue in that fashion. So, there have been subsequent ones, but that one was not the most powerful one, but the most powerful one was also humility. It's amazing. It's amazing. You want to hear about that one?
Of course. Of course. What do you think?
Humility. The takeaway is humility, okay? So that one was 2007. 7, 6, I don't remember. 2006. His body was gravely ill, going through dialysis 3 times a week. He wasn't able to travel. He went back to Taiwan. That was the last time he came back. But anyone was able to see him in the West. So went back to Taiwan. So I went to see him. Kidney. Shifu, take my kidney. You can take my kidney. You take both if you want. He says, unethical. An old man like me take a young person's kidney? No, it's all good. Just leave it. So he says, stay for a few days. And when I found out that he couldn't come back, and everyone was alarmed, all his students in the West. So I went back, rushed back. And then told me to stay for a few days. When he left, I said, Shifu, I'll bring all your Western Dharma teacher in training students. I'll bring them back. He says, yes, that'd be nice. Nice. Came back. Did a retreat. He was already unable to move. He was in wheelchair. He could walk, but it was just more convenient on wheelchair. Did a 49-day retreat. And I did people can do 7 days at a time. Yeah, you don't have to, because most people can't take off work for 49 days. So 7 sevens. So by the early 2000s, he had already told me to use koan, huatou method. He told me to change, because all those years I've been working with silent illumination. He says, now you're gonna master huatou. Forget about that. Use that approach. So that's what I was working on during that retreat. Great conviction. All the prerequisites. Great conviction, faith. Great vows. Great ferocious determination. And great doubt. These are the 4 typical prerequisites. Yeah. Yet, the sense of wonderment, the doubt sensation with regard to my Huatou was not continuous. I offer my life. That's the way he taught us to practice. Offer your life. If you die, fine. Tuck you under the altar, your corpse. After the retreat, take it out. So everyone going there was ready to die. So I gave everything. Yet, I couldn't understand why my sense of wonderment, the Tao sensation, was fragmented. So it wasn't seamless until so this has gone on for over a week. Every day I see the frailty of his body. Getting out of the wheelchair, attendants, sitting on his seat and give the evening Dharma talk. It was so painful to see that. And one night he was talking about repentance, humility, and that brought everything together. It was like a missing puzzle for me. Why? Because I see this man that I know since I was 10 offering his life. That's why his body is like this. He traveled back and forth, back and forth. In America, he wasn't that famous, although all the Chan Zen teachers secretly read his books, but he wasn't really famous. He had maybe a handful of Western students. For us, he toiled his life. He came back. In Taiwan, thousands. In the West, just a few handfuls. Why should he come back for us? He did that for 30 years. And I felt such remorse, shame. What have we done? What have we done? Except worrying about our practice and doing this and that. He gave his life. And he's talking about humility, repentance, about how he feels when he sees his students. He's not capable enough to bring them to full fruition because of limitation with his body now. And tears streaming up. And that night, that was the last ingredient. Great faith, great vow, great ferocious determination, great doubt, and that great humility that put everything together. And humility has a great function of diminishing self. Right? You want to get something. Humility. Offer this to the cushion, to the John Hall, to this life. What is it? Right? What is Wu? The dog had Buddha nature. Wu. The Japanese say Wu means no. This no is not yes or no. It's not that no. It's unfathomable, impenetrable. Just don't know. That just collapsed it. So throughout for a couple of days, I was into that. Until the head monk. During the day, my teacher couldn't lead a retreat. The head monk did. Master Guo Gu, my older Dharma brother, screaming, hollering at everyone. Fast walking meditation. just running in Chan Hall, slams the incense stick board. Stop. It's like thunder. All the whole Chan Hall roaring with that. Everyone running on wood. This continuous sound. You're running, you don't even know where you are. Slams it. When he slammed it, I lost everything. I didn't know where the hell I was. Everyone stopped. I kept running. So I would just keep on running. I ran. I didn't know where I was. I was just bam, just in this abyss. No color, no shape, no inside, outside. Me, Chan Hall, others, I didn't know where the hell I was. Kept on running. He just went upstairs to his room, just left it, right? And the timekeepers keep on. They didn't know. I don't know what they thought. I didn't talk to them. But all I knew was, what? It wasn't even a phrase. I was just in that. Kept on running. I knew the body was running, but it's as if having no body, and it was just, don't know. I don't know how long I ran for. Suddenly I stopped. And I went to the timekeeper, which was a nun. I went right up to her, like, must be this close. Went up to her face. Where is Guo Gu? The head monk. She went upstairs. So I ran upstairs, knocked on his door. He opened the door in his half-dressed t-shirt, pants. Short, stocky fellow. I said, I don't know. I don't know what is Wu. I don't know what is Wu. He says, look at me, take a look. He says, put it down now. That single word, put it down now. It's like a flush of drenched sweat, completely drenched out. And remember what I said about Master Sheng Yen? It's like the adrenaline, cortisol flushing, suddenly like peace. Usually people need time to, for the cortisol to kind of flush out, or chemicals in the body. I was in this complete, engulfed nonsense. We don't need that. We don't need gradual. Suddenly, everything at peace. There's no trace of I was running and sweating and panting. You don't need any of that. For normal people, maybe physiologically, they have to gradually slow down. Not at all. Everything dropped away. Total peace. Prostrate to him. He says, good. Go outside and take a walk. I said, yeah, okay. Went downstairs. Another monk in charge, my older Dharma brother. I went up to him, just hugged him. He says to me, they were walking the grass field at that time. He says to me, difficult, isn't it? And I said, easy. I don't think he knew what was happening. And he smiled, and I smiled, hugged him. So laid on the grass. Laid on grass. Everyone's doing walking meditation stuff. I got up in the evening. Dharma talk again, my teacher, next day. The end of the second week, 14th day, went to my teacher. I had to go to Japan now. I was scheduled to go to Japan, do some research on blood writing, actually. And so I said I had to go. I told her about my experiences. went to Japan, decided to go to Myoshingji, Temple of Mind of Sublime, Myoshingji, Minsai Zen. And Noritake Shunan Roshi is there. At one cloister in the monastic complex. So I went there in my shorts. Said, can I see the Zen master? My poor Japanese. The monks was like, who the heck are you? Do you have an appointment? No. And I told him, I had some experience. I just finished a 2 weeks retreat. I have some experience. I wanted to maybe talk about it with him. And he says, okay, hold on. And so we had a nice conversation. I found out Noritake Shunan was actually born in Taiwan. He's Japanese, but he was born during the colonial period. The Japanese took over Taiwan for 50 years. He was actually born in Taiwan. He told me, he gave me some presents. His fan wrote some words for me. It was a very nice meeting. It was the first time I spoke with a Japanese Zen teacher. I wanted to kind of touch base. Actually, I wanted to see Myoshingji is supposed to be this great monastery. I wanted to see who's the Zen teacher there. So very fortunate. His schedule was open actually, and he was willing to see me. So we had a nice conversation, heart to heart. And I told him about the experience and asked me about Huatou. They're not used to doing Huatou. They do koan practice, you know. So he said, yeah, I heard about that kind of approach. So, but derailed a little bit. Anyway, the point is humility. That's for me. Yeah. So the takeaway would be there are different ingredients, you know. But we have, in order to make it alive, you have to connect it to your being, connect it to what works for you in a genuine, honest, ruthlessly honest way, as long as you pour your whole being into the practice. No reservations. Don't hold back. And the proper guidance, then you will find a way. So for me, it was humility. Other people, maybe something else. Yeah.
Thank you. Marvelous. Very wonderful indeed. I'm aware of the time now. I'd really like to, if you're willing, perhaps talk again. There's still a lot we could talk about. I have many questions, of course, about your book, Silent Illumination, and also other questions around the themes of your teaching. But this has been remarkable. Perhaps I will end on one question that I think perhaps finishes, to an extent, some of the themes that we've been discussing today. You've shared about this profound relationship you've had with Master Sheng Yen as his attendant and student over these many years. And you're also talking of his illness around 2006, 7, 8. And I'm curious, for you, having been so close to him for so long in such a profound way as you've described, can you say something about the passing of your teacher and how it has been now 12 years later? How has the time been these last 12 years after his death?
Thank you. He was my father. Although my physical body came from my parents, he opened my eyes, my Dharma eye, and my life direction, meaning. It was him who provided that. So 2006, he couldn't come back to the West. I went back to see him. 2007, did a retreat, brought all of his students to see him. And into 2008, I kept contacting him through letter. Early 2009, he passed away. The last letter I wrote to him was, Shifu. Well, I didn't want to make the mistake that Ananda did. I don't know if you know the story. Shakyamuni Buddha hinted at Ananda about his possibility of entering into parinirvana. And Ananda did not ask him to stay. That was one of the flaws of Ananda. And so no one requested him to stay longer. So he entered into parinirvana. So I knew that story. So I said, Shifu, my last letter, Shifu, please stay. Please. This world needs you, everyone, and still benefit from you. And I was in school at that time. So I said, Shifu, I'm still in school. I can't leave. Please, at least, I want to see you. At least wait till, my spring break or whatever, so I can come back and see you. Of course, he passed away early February. And I left school. When I saw him, I said, so his passing away was a momentous moment in Taiwan, actually. The president showed up, and the previous president showed up. Actually, the first president that showed up was the president. When he found out, I don't know how he found out. Maybe the monastic officers let him know, and it was in the news. So I went back after he passed away, and I heard from the attendant monks that he was really not doing too well. But I couldn't go back right away before he passed away. I went back after he already passed away, and I saw him in the Buddha Hall. Yeah, his casket. He passed away, lying on the right side. So his corpse. When I saw that, it was this emptiness. This emptiness filled the whole room, and it wasn't the emptiness like Kensho emptiness. This was emptiness and grief. Like a part of me, a part of him, a part of this Dharma drum mountain, absent. So we did vigil with a monastic and lay people together. We did vigil for, they did it for 49 days in meditation. In our tradition, we didn't really, chant Amitabha's name or anything like that, which is very popular in Chinese Buddhism, for rebirth or whatever. There may have been some ritual like that, but really we just all sat in meditation, rows and rows of monastics and lay people. And we did visual. So however long people can do it, that's however they did it. So there's alternating time. That also changed me because, yes, I was one of his close disciples, but my path up to that time was academia. I practice myself. I offer my life to his mission and endeavors, whatever he wanted to do, fine, get it done. So that was what I intended to do. But when he passed, coming back to the States, I felt if I don't share his teaching as my way to repay the gratitude towards him, it would not be right. It would have wasted his time, wasted all those decades. So I decided to repay my gratitude to my teacher by sharing the little that I know, his teachings, articulated in my way, accessible to people. I was his translator, so I speak English fluently, so I could just directly share with people. So that's my vow. So this life, I'm here to repay my gratitude. So my books, retreats, in my heart is all dedicated to him, so that his legacy will continue. Of course, he doesn't need any of that, but my part as a disciple, I do my part. Share the teachings. Even though the way I teach is different than him, if I were to share exactly the same, like regurgitate what he says, then that would be wronging him. So since then, all these years, for me, it's just repay gratitude. That's what I do.
Marvelous. This has been just a really incredible interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. We'll meet again.
I hope so.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.